Admiral Park Taiho stood in the shadows of the great hall on the Sara, watching the ceremony unfold before him. The hall was beautiful in a cold way, built from white stone that glowed under the light of 3 moons. Representatives from 100 species filled the room, their strange bodies and stranger voices, creating a noise like music played wrong. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Yun Hana, her black hair pulled back tight, her dress the color of Earth's oceans. She smiled as she spoke to the gathered aliens, her voice smooth and practiced. "Humanity is grateful for its place in the Confederation," she said. "We have learned so much from our elder brothers and sisters among the stars. Together we build a future of peace and cooperation." Park's hands tightened into fists at his sides. He had heard these words 1,000 times. He had spoken similar words himself when duty required it. But they were lies. Every human in this room knew they were lies. The aliens did not. 300 years ago, humanity reached the stars. They were young and eager and full of hope. They thought they would find friends among the distant worlds. Instead, they found the Confederation. The elder races did not welcome humanity. They tested them. They said these tests would prove if humans were civilized enough to join galactic society. The tests were simple. Survive. The Velshar came first, crystalline beings who thought themselves gods. They burned Earth's first colony ships. When humans rebuilt, the Velshar burned them again. They called it a lesson in humility. The Keth came next. Insects the size of men who built their empire on the bodies of lesser species. They took human worlds and human people. They used humans as labor, as food, as entertainment. They called it a lesson in hierarchy. The Maroon watched from their water worlds and did nothing. Other species watched and did nothing. This was how the galaxy worked. New species proved themselves or died. 12 billion humans died before the Confederation decided humanity had learned enough lessons. Park remembered the day the killing stopped. He was young then, just a junior officer. He remembered the ceremonies and the speeches. He remembered the Confederation ambassadors smiling as they welcomed humanity into their society. He remembered wanting to cut those smiles from their faces, but humanity needed peace. They needed time. So they smiled back. Now Park watched Ambassador Yun smile at creatures whose ancestors had murdered billions of her people. He watched her bow to the Velshar representative, a being of blue crystal who looked at her like she was an insect. He watched her laugh at a joke from the Keth ambassador, whose species still kept humans as slaves on distant worlds the Confederation chose not to see. This was what humanity had become, smiling, bowing, playing civilized. A young officer approached Park from behind. Captain Beek Jasu was tall and serious, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She served aboard the HSS Remembrance, one of the human fleet's finest ships. "Admiral," she said quietly, "we need to speak." Park did not turn from the ceremony. "Speak." "Our intelligence networks have detected movement. Velshar and Keth fleets are gathering near our colonial borders. The numbers are significant." "How significant?" 3,000 vessels combined. "They're calling it a joint exercise?" Park finally looked at her. Jasu's face was calm, but he could see the worry beneath. She was young enough to still believe the Confederation might play fair. Park had lost that belief long ago. "Have you reported this to the ambassador?" he asked. "I came to you first, sir." Park nodded slowly. "Good, I will handle it." He moved through the crowd toward Yun Hana, his uniform drawing looks from the alien representatives. Humans in military dress made them nervous. They preferred humans in soft clothes, with soft smiles, speaking soft words. They preferred humans who knew their place. Park reached the ambassador as she finished speaking with a maroon delegate, a fish-like creature in a water-filled suit. Yun turned to him with a diplomatic smile that faded when she saw his expression. "Admiral, is something wrong? We need to speak privately." She led him to a quiet alcove away from the crowd. Her smile disappeared entirely now, replaced by the sharp intelligence she hid behind her diplomatic mask. "What is it?" Park told her about the fleets. He told her the numbers. He told her his concerns. Yoon listened without expression. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. It's probably nothing, she said finally. The Velshar and Keth conduct exercises regularly. They like to remind each other of their strength. They're conducting these exercises on our border. That's not regular. I'll make inquiries through diplomatic channels. Quietly. We don't want to cause alarm over nothing. Park stepped closer to her. And if it's not nothing? If they're preparing for something? Yoon met his eyes. He saw fear there, buried deep but present. She knew what he knew. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Then we will respond appropriately, she said. But carefully. We cannot afford a war with the Confederation, Admiral. We would not survive it. We survived their tests. Barely. And we lost 12 billion people. She softened slightly. I know what they did to us. I have not forgotten. But our duty is to protect humanity's future, not avenge its past. Sometimes that means swallowing our pride. Park wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her that pride had nothing to do with it. This was about survival. The Confederation had tried to destroy humanity once. They would try again. It was only a matter of time, but he said nothing. He simply nodded and walked away. Later that night, Park returned to his flagship in orbit above the Sara. The ship was called the HSS Unity, a name chosen by diplomats to sound peaceful. Park hated the name, but he loved the ship. It was his home, his weapon, his purpose. He walked through its corridors alone until he reached a door that few knew existed. He pressed his hand to the scanner, and the door opened onto a small room. The walls were covered in names. 12 billion names, written so small they looked like texture until you stepped close. Park had ordered this room built when he took command. Every human ship had one like it. A reminder, he stood in the center of the room and looked at the names of the dead. His grandmother was here somewhere. His grandfather. Aunts, uncles, cousins he had never met because they died before he was born. We have not forgotten, he whispered to them. We wear their masks. We speak their words. We play their games. But we have not forgotten, he touched the wall gently. And we have not been idle. He thought of the things hidden in humanity's shipyards. The weapons no one knew about. The plans no one suspected. 300 years of smiling and bowing and playing civilized. And every single day humanity had been preparing. The elder races thought they had tamed humanity. They thought the tests had broken something in the human spirit. They were wrong. The tests had only taught humanity to be patient. Park turned from the wall of names and walked back to his bridge. Captain Jisoo was waiting for him with more reports, more concerns, more evidence that the Confederation was moving against them. He listened to it all. He filed it away. And he waited. The day would come. He knew it in his bones. The day the masks would fall. The day humanity would show the galaxy what it really was. He only hoped he would live to see it. Governor Choi. Yoonji stood on the balcony of her office and watched the sunset over New Bizan. The sky turned orange and pink, painting the city below in warm colors. Children played in the parks. Families walked along the river. Farmers worked in the fields beyond the city walls, bringing in the harvest that would feed millions. She had built this. 40 years of work, of planning, of fighting for every resource and every approval. When she first came to this world, it was empty rock and thin air. Now 80 million people called it home. Her grandchildren were down there somewhere. Probably in the park near their school, playing with their friends until their mother called them for dinner. The thought made Yoonji smile. She was 63 years old, and she had seen much darkness in her life. But moments like this made it all worth it. Her assistant knocked on the door behind her. Governor, the Confederation representative is here. Yoonji's smile faded. She had been expecting this visit but hoping it would not come. Send him in. Elder Veilthus entered her office like he owned it. He was Velshar, his body made of blue crystal that caught the light and threw it around the room. He was old even by his species' standards, and he looked at Yoonji the way a person might look at a bug. Governor Choi, he said. His voice sounded like glass scraping stone. I bring word from the Confederation Council. I am honored by your visit, Elder. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. How may New Bizin serve the Confederation? Veilthus did not sit. He did not ask permission to speak. He simply spoke as if Yunji's presence was barely worth noticing. Recent surveys have discovered significant deposits of crystalline energy beneath this world's surface. These deposits fall under ancient Velshar territorial claims predating human settlement. The Council has recognized these claims. Humanity is directed to evacuate this world within 30 standard days. Yunji stared at him. For a moment she thought she had misunderstood. Evacuate? All 80 million colonists must be removed. No human structures or materials may remain. The world will be transferred to Velshar administration immediately following evacuation. Elder, you cannot be serious. This world has been human territory for over a century. We have legal claims, treaties, documentation. Your claims have been reviewed and dismissed. The Council's decision is final. Yunji felt her heart beating hard in her chest. 30 days. 30 days to move 80 million people. It was impossible. Even if they had the ships, even if they had somewhere to go, they could not possibly complete such an evacuation in 30 days. What about compensation? She asked. Resettlement assistance? These people have built lives here. Homes, businesses, families. The Confederation does not compensate for territory it already owns. Veilthus turned toward the door. You have 30 days, Governor. I suggest you begin immediately. He left without another word. Yunji stood alone in her office as darkness fell outside. The beautiful sunset was gone. The city lights came on below, millions of people going about their lives without knowing that those lives had just been stolen from them. She contacted Admiral Park Taiho within the hour. She contacted Ambassador Yun Hana. She contacted every human official who might help. The Admiral's response was silence. He was gathering information, assessing options, preparing for something he did not yet name. The ambassador's response was caution. We must comply, Yun said over the communication channel. I know it's unjust. I know it's cruel. But if we resist, they will use it as an excuse. They want a war, Yunji. They want us to give them a reason. We cannot give them one. You're asking me to abandon 80 million people. I'm asking you to save them. If you resist, the Confederation will come with warships. They will call it peacekeeping. They will call it restoring order. And everyone on New Bizin will die. Yun's voice was heavy with grief. At least this way, they live. Yunji wanted to argue. She wanted to scream. But she knew Yun was right. The Confederation was looking for an excuse. Humanity was not ready for the war that would follow. So she announced the evacuation. The news spread across New Bizin within hours. Yunji watched the reaction from her office. Shock came first, then denial, then anger. People gathered in the streets, demanding answers, demanding resistance, demanding that anyone do something, but there was nothing to do. The evacuation ships began to arrive. Human vessels from across colonial space, coming to collect refugees from a world that had committed no crime except being valuable. Lieutenant Kong Minho was part of the security force managing the evacuation. He was young, only 26. But he had grown up on New Bizin. His grandmother was Governor Choi. His entire family was here. He watched children being loaded onto ships with nothing but small bags of belongings. He watched elderly couples leaving homes they had built with their own hands. He watched farmers looking back at fields they would never harvest, and he watched the Velshar soldiers who had arrived to oversee the evacuation. They walked through human streets like conquerors. They touched human buildings like they were already measuring them for demolition. They looked at human people like they were looking at animals. Minho's hands shook with anger. But he kept his weapon holstered. He followed orders. He stayed calm. 20-9 days passed. The evacuation was almost complete. Most of the population was gone, scattered to refugee camps on other worlds. Only a few thousand remained. Finishing the last transfers, Minho was patrolling the perimeter of the spaceport when he heard the scream. A Child had wandered too close to the Velshar security line. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, looking for her parents in the chaos. A Velshar soldier grabbed her arm and threw her to the ground. When she cried, he raised his weapon to strike her. Minho did not think. He drew his sidearm and fired. The Velshar soldier shattered into 1,000 crystal pieces. For a moment, everything was silent. The little girl stared up at Minho with wide eyes. The other Velshar soldiers stared at their fallen comrade. Minho stared at what he had done. Then the Velshar commander spoke into his communicator. Minho did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. "Run," he said to the girl. "Find your parents. Get to a ship." "Run now." She ran. Minho turned to face the Velshar soldiers advancing on him. He knew he was going to die. He knew he had just given the Confederation their excuse, but he could not regret it. He could not watch a child be beaten and do nothing. He was human. Humans protected their own. The first energy blast hit him in the shoulder and spun him to the ground. He waited for the second blast. The killing shot. It never came. Instead, light came. Light from above, so bright it turned the world white. Light and heat and noise like the sky itself was screaming. The Velshar had contacted their fleet in orbit. The fleet had responded. Minho lay on the ground and watched fire fall from the sky. The capital city of New Bizan, home to 15 million people, disappeared beneath the bombardment. Buildings became dust. Streets became craters. People became nothing at all. He screamed, but his voice was lost in the roar. He tried to stand, to run, to do something, but there was nothing to do. There was only fire and death and the knowledge that he had caused this. When the bombardment ended, the city was gone. 15 million people were gone. Governor Troy's grandchildren were gone. Everything was gone. Minho lay in the ash and waited to die. But death did not come for him. Perhaps the Velshar wanted him alive, a witness to what happened when humans forgot their place. Instead, rescue came. Human ships that had been fleeing the system turned back when they saw the bombardment. They landed in the ruins and pulled survivors from the wreckage. They found Minho still alive, still clutching his weapon, still staring at the sky where death had fallen. They took him away from New Bizan. They took him toward human space. And as the ship left orbit, Minho looked back at the world he had known his entire life. It was burning. The whole planet was burning. The news of New Bizan reached Admiral Park Taiho on his flagship. He listened to the reports without expression. He watched the footage of the bombardment. He saw the death toll climb, 15 million confirmed dead. More still being counted. Captain Jisu stood beside him, tears running down her face. She had friends on New Bizan, family, people she would never see again. Park felt the rage building inside him, the same rage that had burned in his chest for 300 years. But this time, he did not push it down. This time he let it rise. He opened a communication channel. The channel was special, encrypted beyond anything the Confederation could break. It connected him to every human ship, every human station, every human world. "This is Admiral Park Taiho," he said. "You have seen what they did to New Bizan. You have seen what they have always done to us. You have seen what they will always do." He paused, looking at the footage of burning cities, of fleeing refugees, of a child thrown to the ground by a creature who thought itself superior. No more. No more masks. No more smiles. No more playing civilized. He took a breath. They wanted to see what we really are. Now they will see. All ships, all stations, all forces, execute protocol remembrance. The war begins now. Across human space, the message was received. And humanity began to change. The galaxy expected humanity to crumble. They expected panic, chaos, desperate pleas for mercy. They expected humans to remember their place. They were wrong. In the week following New Bizan, Confederation intelligence networks reported strange activity in human space. Ships were moving, but not in retreat. Stations were powering up systems that had never been activated before. Communications were flowing through channels that had not existed hours earlier. The Velshar dismissed it as death throes. The Keth called it amusing. The other species watched and waited. Deep in Sol's asteroid belt, far from any shipping lanes or patrol routes, a facility came to life. It had been built over 200 years, piece by piece, hidden in plain sight. The Confederation had never found it because they had never thought to look. Humans were simple creatures. Humans were weak. What could they possibly be hiding? Dr. Shin Yuna stood in the command center of the facility and watched screens flicker on around her. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes from decades of work. She had spent her entire adult life in this place, building things that should not exist. "Status report," she said. Her assistant read from a display. "All systems online. Production facilities at full capacity. Weapons platforms activating across the network. We are ready, Director." Yuna nodded slowly. She had waited her whole life for this moment. Part of her had hoped it would never come. But another part, the part that remembered what the Confederation had done to her grandmother's generation, that part was ready. She opened the channel to Admiral Park. "Prometheus Initiative is active. We are at your command." Park's voice came back steady and cold. "Begin deployment. All assets, all weapons. Hold nothing back. Understood." Yuna turned to her team, the scientists and engineers who had worked beside her all these years. They looked back at her with fear and excitement and something that might have been relief. The secret was finally over. "You heard the Admiral," she said. "Let's show them what humans can do." Across the facility, machines began to move. Assembly lines that had been waiting for this moment started producing weapons the Confederation had never imagined. Ships that had been hidden in hollowed-out asteroids powered up their engines for the first time. Satellites disguised as space debris revealed themselves as weapons platforms capable of destroying fleets. And in the deepest part of the facility, something else woke up. Something that Dr. Shin Yuna had spent 20 years building. Something that would change everything. The Keth Dominion was the first to learn what humanity had become, a Keth armada of 300 vessels had been moving toward human space since New Bizan. They expected to find broken colonies and fleeing refugees. They expected easy prey. Fleet Commander O. Daesung met them at the border with 40 ships. The Keth commander laughed when he saw the human force. 40 ships against 300. The humans were even more foolish than he had thought. "Open a channel," the Keth commander said. "I want to hear them beg." The channel opened. Commander O's face appeared on screen. He was calm, almost bored. "Keth vessels," O said. "You are in human space. You have one chance to withdraw. I suggest you take it." The Keth commander's laughter grew louder. "One chance? Little human, we will tear your ships apart and use your bones for decoration. Your species had one purpose in this galaxy, to serve us. You forgot that purpose. Now you will be reminded." O nodded slowly. "Very well, you have chosen." He closed the channel. The Keth commander gave the order to attack. 300 vessels surged forward, weapons charging, ready to destroy the tiny human fleet. Then the human ships did something impossible. They vanished. One moment they were there. The next, they were gone. The Keth commander stared at his displays in confusion. Had they fled? Had they cloaked? Where the human ships reappeared inside the Keth formation. Not in front of it, not beside it. Inside it, scattered throughout the 300 Keth. Vessels like they had simply stepped through space. And then they fired. The weapons they used were nothing the Keth had ever seen. Gravity beams that crushed ships into balls of metal smaller than a fist. Energy pulses that passed through shields like they weren't there. Missiles that moved faster than light, striking targets before sensors could detect them. The Keth died without understanding what was killing them. 11 minutes. That was all it took. 300 Keth warships, the pride of the Dominion's fleet, reduced to debris floating in the void. Commander O surveyed the wreckage from his bridge. His crew was silent, stunned by what they had done, what they had been capable of doing all along. "Send a message to the Keth homeworld?" O said. "Tell them their fleet is destroyed. Tell them we are coming." The message was sent. And across the galaxy, fear began to spread. Admiral Park Taiho stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched reports come in from every front. Keth fleets destroyed, Velshar outposts captured, Confederation supply lines cut. Everywhere humanity struck, they won. Captain Jasu approached him with a communication request. Sir, the Confederation Council is demanding to speak with you. They're calling this unprovoked aggression. They're threatening consequences. Park almost smiled. Unprovoked? 15 million dead on New Bisan, and they call our response unprovoked. Shall the first refuse the communication? Park considered it. Then he shook his head. No, open the channel. Let them see me, let them hear what I have to say. The main screen flickered and the Confederation Council appeared. They were gathered in their great chamber, representatives from dozens of species, all looking at Park with expressions ranging from anger to fear. At the center sat the Velshar High Council, their crystal bodies glowing with rage. Admiral Park, the lead Velshar said, you have committed acts of war against the Confederation. You have destroyed lawful military vessels. You have attacked sovereign territory. Cease your aggression immediately, or face the full force of galactic justice. Park looked at them for a long moment. He thought of the wall of names on his ship. He thought of New Bisan burning. He thought of 300 years of masks and smiles and swallowed rage. You speak of justice, he said. Let me tell you about justice. He stepped closer to the screen. 300 years ago, you came to us and said you wanted to test our civilization? You burned our colonies. You killed our people. You took our children as slaves. 12 billion humans died in your tests. And when you were satisfied, when you had broken us enough, you welcomed us into your confederation and called it peace. His voice grew harder. We smiled for you. We bowed for you. We called you elder brothers while you treated us like animals. We did everything you asked. And still you took New Bisan. Still you murdered 15 million people because we had something you wanted. He leaned forward. You taught us to wear masks. You taught us to play civilized. You taught us that strength must be hidden, that anger must be swallowed, that pride must be buried. We learned your lessons very well. He straightened. But now school is over. The screen behind him changed, showing images of human ships and weapons the Confederation had never seen. Vessels 3 times the size of anything in the galactic fleet. Weapons that bent space and shattered matter. An armada that had been built in secret over 3 centuries. You wanted to see what we really are, Park said. You wanted to know what hid behind our masks. Here it is. We are the species that fought its way to dominance on a death world. We are the species that split the atom and reached the stars through fire and will. We are the children of Earth, and Earth never raised us to be tame. He looked directly into the screen, into the eyes of the creatures who had tormented his people for so long. You had your chance to live with us as equals. You chose to treat us as prey. Now you will see what happens when prey stops running. He nodded to Jasu, who cut the transmission. Silence filled the bridge. The crew stared at their admiral, at the man who had just declared war on the entire galaxy. Park turned to them. All ships, all forces. Advance on all fronts. No mercy for those who showed us none. We end this. The orders went out. The fleet moved, and humanity, finally unmasked, began to show the galaxy what it could really do on Earth. Ambassador Yoon Hannah watched the transmission from her office. She saw Park's speech. She saw the weapons. She saw the fleet. For 300 years, she had believed in diplomacy. She had believed that humanity could earn its place through patience and cooperation. She had believed the Confederation could be changed from within. Now she understood the Confederation would never change. They would never see humans as equals. They would always take what they wanted and kill anyone who resisted. She had been wrong. Park had been right. She opened a channel to the Admiral. I was wrong, she said simply. About everything. Finish it. Whatever it takes, finish it. Park's voice came back, tired but resolved. That's the plan. Yuna closed the channel and looked out the window at Earth below. The planet that had given birth to humanity. The planet that had taught them to survive, to fight, to never give up. The galaxy thought they knew what humans were. They thought they had measured human strength and found it lacking. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The war spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Human fleets struck everywhere at once. They did not follow the rules of galactic warfare. They did not capture territory or negotiate surrenders. They simply destroyed. Pilot Sergeant Nojiwu led a fighter squadron called the Morning Stars. There were 12 pilots in the squadron, and each one carried a name. Not their own name. The name of a child who had died on New Bizun. Jiwu's name was Kim Sora, age 7. The little girl whose death had started the bombardment. The little girl Lieutenant Kang Minho had tried to save. Jiwu painted her kills on the side of her fighter. After 2 months of war, the fighter was almost entirely red. Today she was leading her squadron against a Keth fleet guarding one of their core worlds. The Keth had gathered 200 ships, their last major defense force. They thought numbers would save them. Jiwu's squadron had 20 fighters. "Morning Stars," she said over the communication channel. "Remember your names. Remember why we fight. Let's send these bugs back to hell." The fighters launched Keth Point. Defense systems filled space with energy beams and missiles. Any normal fighter squadron would have been torn apart in seconds. But these were not normal fighters. They danced through the fire like it wasn't there. Their ships moved in ways that should have been impossible, making turns that would have killed normal pilots. But these pilots had been modified, enhanced, improved in ways the Confederation had never suspected. Humanity had not just built better ships. They had built better humans. Jiwu's fighter slipped through a gap in the Keth formation and released her payload. The bombs were small, barely visible. They attached to the hull of a Keth carrier and waited. 3 seconds later, the carrier began to dissolve. The bombs contained nano-machines, tiny robots that ate metal and energy and everything else they touched. Within minutes, the carrier was gone, consumed from within. The Morning Stars repeated the process across the fleet. Ship after ship fell to the tiny machines. The Keth tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Human capital ships had surrounded them, cutting off every escape route. When the last Keth vessel died, Jiwu looked at the debris field and thought of Sora, 7 years old. Thrown to the ground by a Velshar soldier, killed in a bombardment meant to punish humans for defending her. "That was for you," Jiwu whispered. "Rest now." She turned her fighter toward the next target. There was more work to do. Archivist Tuan Suman traveled with the fleet, recording everything. She was 50 years old, a historian who had spent her life studying humanity's past. Now she was documenting its present. She interviewed soldiers between battles. She recorded their stories, their reasons, their feelings. She wanted future generations to understand what happened here. And why? Today she was interviewing Admiral Park Taiho. They sat in his quarters aboard the flagship. The room was simple, almost empty. Just a bed, a desk, and the wall of names. Suman looked at the names for a long moment before turning to the Admiral. "Why won't you accept surrenders?" she asked. Park was quiet for a while. He looked tired, Suman thought. Tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "Because they won't mean it," he said finally. "The Keth have surrendered before. The Velshar have made peace before. And every time they come back, they wait until their enemy is weak, and then they strike again. It's what they are. It's what they've always been. So you're going to destroy them completely? Every ship, every world? Not every world, not every person. But their ability to make war, yes. Their fleets, their weapons, their leadership. All of it must go." Suman leaned forward. "And what makes us different? What makes this not just another cycle of revenge that will go on forever?" Park met her eyes. "Maybe nothing. Maybe we're just as bad as they are. Maybe in 1,000 years some other species will rise up and destroy us for what we're doing now." He looked at the wall of names. "But I don't think so. Because when this is over, we're going to build something new. Not an empire. Not a confederation that bullies and kills and pretends to be civilized. Something better. Something where no one has to wear masks. Do you really believe that's possible?" Park was silent for a long moment. "I have to believe it," he said. Otherwise, what was the point of any of this? The Keth homeworld was called Nexer Prime. It was the center of their civilization, home to their queens and their government and their most sacred hives. No enemy had ever touched it. The Keth believed no enemy ever could. They were wrong. The human fleet arrived in orbit over Nexer Prime on a day the Keth would never forget. 10,000 ships, more than the Keth had ever seen in one place. They blotted out the stars like a shroud. Admiral Park gave the Keth one chance to surrender their leadership and disband their military. The queens refused. They called him a primitive. They told him the Keth had ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years, and would rule it 10,000 more. The bombardment began. Human weapons fell on Keth cities and military bases and shipyards. The Queen's Palace, a structure that had stood for millennia, collapsed into rubble. Hive after hive went dark as their populations fled or died. When the bombardment ended, the surviving Keth emerged to find human soldiers walking through their streets, human flags flying from their buildings, human ships controlling their skies. The queens who had refused to surrender were found in their bunkers and executed. The queens who had cooperated were allowed to live, but their power was broken. The Keth dominion was over. Some called it justice. Others called it massacre. Archivist Kwan Su-min called it both. She walked through the ruins of a Keth city, recording the destruction. Bodies lay in the streets. Buildings burned. Survivors sat in the wreckage, staring at nothing. A young Keth approached her. It was barely mature, probably equivalent to a human teenager. It looked at her with compound eyes full of fear and confusion. "Why?" it asked. Its voice was translated by Sumin's device. "Why did you do this?" Sumin thought about the question. She thought about New Bisan. She thought about 12 billion names on walls across human space. She thought about 300 years of humiliation and murder and oppression. "Because you did it to us first," she said. "Because we asked you to stop and you wouldn't. Because the only language you understood was force." The young Keth was silent. "It's not fair," it said finally. "We didn't do those things. We weren't even born yet." Sumin felt something twist in her chest. The young Keth was right. It wasn't fair. War was never fair. The innocent always paid for the crimes of the guilty. "No," she said. "It's not fair. But maybe it's necessary. Maybe this is the only way to make sure it never happens again." She left the young Keth there and continued her recording. She didn't know if she believed her own words. She didn't know if anything could truly justify what humanity was doing, but she knew humanity had tried everything else. They had tried diplomacy and cooperation and patience. They had tried wearing masks and swallowing anger and playing civilized. None of it had worked. So now they were trying this. May the gods forgive them. Because the galaxy never would, the Velshar retreated to their fortress worlds. These were ancient places, built over millions of years, protected by technology that predated most civilizations. The Velshar believed they were impregnable. Dr. Shin Yuna proved them wrong. She came to the front lines herself, bringing her newest weapons. Things she had built in secret for decades. Things that should not exist. The first fortress world fell in 3 hours. The second fell in 2. By the 5th, the Velshar stopped believing in their walls. Admiral Park watched the conquest from his flagship. He felt no joy. He felt no satisfaction. He only felt tired. How much longer? He asked Commander O. Months, maybe. We're breaking them fast, but they're not giving up. The Velshar would rather die than surrender. Then they'll die. O was quiet for a moment. Sir, some of the crew are starting to ask questions. About how far we're going. About when this ends. Park looked at him. It ends when they can never threaten us again. It ends when our children and grandchildren can live without fear. It ends when we've built something worth building. And how many more have to die before that happens? Park didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. He looked out at the stars, at the galaxy that was burning because of him. He thought of his grandmother's name on the wall. He thought of New Bisan. He thought of every human who had ever died because the elder races thought them weak. He was doing this for them. For all of them. so that their deaths would mean something. He had to believe that. Otherwise, he was just a murderer on a galactic scale. Continue the advance, he said. All fronts, all targets. We stop when they're broken. The fleet moved forward, and the galaxy continued to burn. Kairos Prime was the heart of everything. It was the oldest world in Velshar space, home to their first cities and their greatest temples. Its crystal spires had stood for 100,000 years, reaching toward the sky like prayers made solid. No enemy had ever landed on its surface. No alien had ever walked its streets without permission. Now the human fleet gathered in orbit above it, and the Velshar knew their time had come. Admiral Park Taiho looked at the world through the viewport of his flagship. It was beautiful, he had to admit. The crystals caught the light of the system's star and scattered into rainbows. Cities sparkled like jewels across the continents. It looked like something from a dream. He was about to turn it into a nightmare. Open a channel to the surface, he said. To the Supreme Arbiter directly. The communication screen flickered and Supreme Arbiter Velkrith appeared. He was ancient, the oldest living Velshar, his crystal body dark with age but still glowing with power. He had ruled his people for 3,000 years. He had seen species rise and fall like waves on a shore. He looked at Park with contempt. So the animal has come at last, Velkrith said. Come to bark at our gates like the primitive beast you are. Park kept his expression neutral. I'm here to offer terms. Surrender your government. Disband your military. Submit to trial for crimes against humanity. Do these things and your people will be spared? Velkrith laughed. It sounded like wind through broken glass. Terms? You offer us terms? Little human, we were building empires when your ancestors were still crawling in the mud. We shaped this galaxy. We decided which species lived and which died. And you think you can dictate to us? I think I have 10,000 ships in orbit and you have none. I think your fleets are destroyed, your allies are broken, and you have nowhere to go. I think if you don't surrender, everyone on this world dies. Velkrith leaned forward, his ancient eyes burning. Then let them die. Let us all die. We will not bow to prey. We will not let primitives dictate the fate of civilization. We are Velshar. We kneel to nothing. Park nodded slowly. He had expected this. He had hoped for something different, but he had expected this. Then you have chosen, he said. And so have we. He closed the channel. The Battle of Kairos Prime lasted 3 days. The Velshar threw everything they had at the human fleet. Ancient weapons from their vaults. Ships that had been in storage for millennia. Technology they had kept secret from the rest of the galaxy. It wasn't enough. Human vessels swept through the Velshar defenses like fire through paper. The weapons that had terrified the galaxy for 100,000 years barely scratched human shields. The ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds fell in minutes. On the second day, human ground forces landed. Lieutenant Kang Minho was among them. He had been promoted twice since New Bizan, decorated for bravery, given command of his own unit. But he didn't care about any of that. He cared about only one thing, finishing this. He led his soldiers through the crystal streets of the Velshar capital. The city was beautiful and strange, all sharp angles and glittering surfaces. It felt like walking through a frozen explosion. Velshar soldiers fought them at every corner. They were fanatics, warriors who had been bred for combat over thousands of generations. They knew they were going to die. They just wanted to take as many humans with them as possible. Minho lost soldiers. Good men and women, people he had trained and fought beside and called friends. Each death was a weight on his chest, another ghost following him through the crystal streets, but he kept moving forward. He had to. This was the end. The last battle. The moment everything had been building toward. On the third day, his unit reached the Arbiter's palace. It was the largest structure on the planet. A tower of black crystal that stretched so high its top was lost in the clouds. Velshar guards filled its halls, ready to die for their ruler. Minho and his soldiers gave them their wish. The fighting was brutal. Room by room, floor by floor, they pushed deeper into the palace. Minho took a crystal shard to his leg and kept fighting. He took another to his arm and kept fighting. He would not stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. Finally, they reached the throne room. It was a vast chamber filled with light from 1,000 crystal windows. At its center sat Supreme Arbiter Velkrith alone on his throne. Surrounded by the shattered bodies of his guards, Minho approached him slowly, weapon raised. His soldiers spread out behind him, covering all angles. Velkrith looked at him without fear, without anger, just contempt, as pure and cold as the crystals around them. So, the Arbiter said, the animal that started all this. The one who killed my soldier on New Bizin. I remember your face from the reports. Minho stopped a few meters from the throne. Your soldier was beating a child. It was disciplining a lesser creature, as was its right, as has always been our right. That right is over. Velkrith stood slowly. He was tall, towering over Minho, his ancient body still powerful despite its age. You think this makes you strong? He asked. You think destroying us proves anything? You are still primitives. You will always be primitives. In 1,000 years, another species will rise and look at what you did here and see you for what you are. Animals pretending to be civilized. Minho thought about that. He thought about his grandmother dying in the fire. He thought about the children being loaded onto evacuation ships. He thought about 15 million dead in a single day. Maybe, he said. But we're animals who survived. You won't, he raised his weapon. This is for New Bizin, this is for 12 billion. This is for everyone you ever hurt because you thought you were better than them. He fired. Supreme Arbiter Velkrith shattered into 1,000 pieces of black crystal. Minho stood there for a long moment, looking at the remains. He had thought he would feel something, triumph, satisfaction, closure. He just felt empty. Admiral Park Taiho landed on Cairo's Prime 6 hours later. The fighting was over. The Velshar government had fallen. The war was won. He walked through the ruins of the capital with archivist Quan Suman beside him. She was still recording, still documenting. She would always be documenting. It's over, she said. We won. The Confederation is finished. Park looked at the destruction around them. Crystal buildings shattered. Bodies in the streets. A civilization that had stood for 100,000 years, brought down in 3 days. We broke something, he said. Whether we won or not, I don't know yet. They reached the Arbiter's palace and climbed to its highest balcony. From there, they could see the whole city, the whole planet, the fleet in orbit above. What happens now? Suman asked. What do we build? Park thought about the question. He had been thinking about it for months, for years. He had fought this war because he believed there was something worth building on the other side. Now he had to prove it. Something better, he said. Something new. Not a confederation that bullies and kills and calls it civilization. Not an empire that rules through fear. Something where people don't have to wear masks. Where they don't have to pretend to be less than they are. Is that possible? I don't know. But we have to try. Otherwise, we're just them with different faces. He looked out at the gathered forces, at the ships and soldiers who had fought across the galaxy. They had killed millions. They had burned worlds. They had done terrible things for what they believed were good reasons. Now they had to be better than what they had. Destroyed. Park activated his communication channel, broadcasting to every human in the system and beyond. To every soldier, every ship, every colony. To everyone who had fought and died and sacrificed for this moment. The war is over, he said. We won. The confederation that humiliated us and murdered us and tried to break us is gone. The elder races that treated us like animals will never threaten us again. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But victory is not enough. We could become what they were. We could rule through fear and call it order. We could treat other species the way they treated us and call it justice. We have the power to do that now, his voice hardened. We won't. Because that's not who we are. That's not why we fought. We fought because we refused to be slaves. We refused to be prey. We refused to wear masks and pretend to be less than we are. He looked at the sky, at the stars, at the galaxy that now lay open before them. Now we're going to build something new. A galaxy where every species is judged by what they do, not what they are. Where strength protects instead of oppresses. Where no one has to hide what they are or be ashamed of where they come from. He took a breath. They asked us to be civilized. They meant tame. They meant broken. Now we'll show them what human civilization really looks like. Not submission, but strength. Not cruelty, but justice. Not domination, but protection for anyone who earns our trust. He straightened. The old galaxy is dead. We killed it. Now we build a better one. That's our duty. That's our purpose. That's what all those deaths were for. He closed the channel. Suman was quiet beside him. She was crying, he realized. Not from sadness? From something else. Something that might have been hope. Do you think we can do it? She asked. Actually build something better? Park thought of everyone they had lost. His grandmother? The 12 billion. New Bizan, all the soldiers who had died in the war, who had given everything for this chance. We have to, he said. We owe them that much. He looked out at the galaxy that was now theirs to shape, and maybe we owe ourselves that much too. The war was over. The Confederation was broken. Humanity had proven what it could do when pushed too far. Now came the harder task, proving what it could do when it had the choice to be better. The galaxy watched and waited, God and humanity. Finally, Free began to build.